Your mic here. Oh, there you go.
What, man? There now? I can't fit there. I'm accustomed to it won't fit. Okay, I can tell you right away, you guys are lucky.
Let's go somewhere else.
Channel.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm going to get this kid home.
What we'll do this afternoon, first I want to thank Greg and the museum for all the work that they put in to make this a successful year. A little pushing. Okay. That's what they say, you're supposed to try to eat the microphone. I was told that once. Let me tell you what we're going to do this afternoon. I'll have to stand here because I don't have one of those fancy clickers. But we're going to introduce the panel. The members of the panel, they can tell you a little bit about their careers and their history. I'll give you a little bit of a historical perspective on the Blackbird program, where it started, why it started, and how we got to where it was at the end of 1990 when the program came back in 1995. We'll give you some facts about the aircraft and the crews, facts that you can use in maybe formulating some questions for the panel. I'll give you a little overview of worldwide operations of the SR-71, where we operated out of, the pieces we operated out of, and where we went with the airplane to provide information to the decision makers in Washington. And then the panel can jump back in and give you some history of what's important to them, what unique events occurred during the time that they were either flying the airplane, maintaining the airplane, or in general, how they, things they remember about the program, which was a few years ago. Okay, let's the panel. At the end here, we have Stormy Boudreaux, who is unique in that he flew operationally in both the U-2 and the SR-71. I believe you told me you had 2,000 hours in the U-2, about 500 in the SR-71. So we want to do a little bit about your military background.
I joined the Air Force in about '68. Went to Vietnam and F-4s, flew 250 combat missions in F-4s there. T-38 instructor after that. Spent a couple of years in what was called a non-rated field, GCI controller, but I was lucky enough that they were short on pilots at the Tyndall Air Force Base where I was at GCI, ground control intercept, and they needed T-33 pilots, so they checked me out as a 33 guy and I flew around there for quite a while. Then I spent a year on a mountaintop in Alaska, and I interviewed for the U-2 program, got into the U-2 program. Just about the time I had become the operations officer for the U-2 program, one of our squadron commanders in the SR-71, Al Joris, was flying with me in a 38, and he says, after the flight was over with, "Hey, you fly a good airplane, how'd you like to be an SR-71 pilot?" And I went, "Sure," even though that between the U-2 program and the SR program, there's a little bit of animosity, you know, brotherly love. So I flew the SR-71 for 4.5–5 years, and things happened, and I went overseas as a TR-1/U-2 pilot again, and then came back to Beale and finished out my career as a U-2 instructor pilot at Beale. By then it was '92, and the SR had gone away for the first time.
You know, I would call the feelings between the U-2 crew and maintenance people and the SR crew as friendly rivalry. We were complementary. We did somewhat the same job, we did it a little differently, and we definitely had parts of our mission for different roles. I'm honored to be, and you should be honored to be, our next panel member, because when I was flying the airplane, he, to me, was Mr. SR-71. He was in the program before there was a program. He got to Beale before there were any airplanes. So Don, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background?
I'm feeling old. Stormy City came in 1968. I came in 1958. It was started out as a B-47 crew chief. went into B-58s as the first supersonic bomber. As a result of that, two of our pilots, Allied Chief Pete Collins, were selected for SR-71 program in 1964. They came and asked me if I'd like to make a trip to California to work on something. They couldn't tell me what it was, but it was real interesting and I should enjoy it. I gave up a different career to do that. I was waiting for an appointment to OCS. I had passed all the tests, I was waiting for an appointment, and I gave that up to come in the SR program. I stayed with the program for 26 years. I did have a tour in Vietnam as an RF-4s, 16th, 12th TAC Rico, and came back to Beale with the SRs, and it was quite different because the same day I got my orders to Vietnam, I had my orders to come back to Beale. 1975, I was selected to become the detachment superintendent at Kadena Okinawa. So I spent 3 years there with my wife and family. Again, I came back to Beale Air Force Base as the OMS superintendent, as the SR superintendent. In 1981, I took over as the OMS superintendent. I had all the tankers, the U-2s, the SRs, and the T-38s. And that's the end of my Air Force career. I don't regret a moment of it. I consider myself one of the most fortunate people on earth.
Thank you.
I can tell you from personal experience, having flown airplanes, that he was in charge of maintaining. He did an outstanding job both at Beale, and he did an outstanding job over at one, which is in Kadena. I don't know if you know, thank you for everything you've done for the program. Somebody else who did a lot for the program, Phil Loignon, our next presenter, he also got in the program before there were any airplanes. Phil?
Thank you. I enlisted in the Air Force in 1955. That gives you a little indication of my age. And I went on to become a P-47 navigator. I got back in this group racing. And along the way, I decided to apply for the SR-71 program. And so I submitted an application. This is a wonderful part of memories. I couldn't remember the fact that I had been turned down the first time I applied for the program. It was only later on when I was going through some old records and I found my rejection letter. Fortunately, I was in the program already, so I didn't hurt my feelings. It's easy to forget something that you don't want to remember. So I ended up in the SR-71 program. Eventually, I got out of that program. In fact, I left the program. The next deployment to Okinawa, our pilot crash landed an airplane over there, but I wasn't there at the time, so I didn't end up in that scenario. But in any case, I came back to Beale after doing a tour over to Thailand and ended up in maintenance control and the assistant DCM, so I had a very luxury program and part of the SR-71 program that will always stay with me.
Okay, our next panel member and I flew together. Our next panel member and I flew together at the same time. I think we may have flown in T-38 together. Because we used the T-38 as a companion trainer. We'd only get, when we were operational, we would only get about 3 flights a month if we were lucky, the SR-71. And then the rest of the time, we would go to the beach. No. The rest of the time, we would split between the simulator and the T-38, and while we were in the T-38, the pilots would obviously fly together. BC holds a lot of accolades, and he's also the envy of all the pilots because he is the high-time pilot of all pilots who flew the SR-71. He told me last night, and I'll see if I can remember, 1,117.3. 1,200. That's why he has the 1,200-hour plan, and I think there's only 3 of those in existence. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. When I went to pilot training, my first assignment was as co-pilot of a KC-135. From there, I flew C-130s in Vietnam, and then transitioned to the B-57, and then to the RB-57/WB-57F, which was a 4-engine high-altitude reconnaissance airplane. So it was a pretty neat airplane. From there, I went to the Air Force Test Pilot School, and I stayed at Edwards for another 3 years, and flew the 104, the T-38, the U-2, and had a great time at Edwards. We flew, I didn't fly operational in the U-2, I flew systems tests, testing the equipment that they put on the airplane. And then from there, I went to the SR-71, and I stayed there 11 years. Oh, I'm glad that Chief Campbell did not go to OTS, because as Chief Master Sergeant here at Beagle, he outranked all of us anyway.
That last comment, that's very true. He did outrank all of us. Okay, now you've met the panel. We'll meet them again in a little bit, but before we go back to the panel and some of their experiences, let's take a look at the history of the airplane. I hope you can see that in the light here. But you have to take yourself back to the mid-50s, long time ago, almost 70 years ago. And the United States, between the United States and Russia, there was the beginning of the Cold War. And the United States military individuals and people in the political world wanted to know what was going on in the Soviet Union. Well, the Soviet Union wasn't open to let us fly over. In fact, Eisenhower proposed what he called the Open Skies Plan, and the Russians wouldn't go along with it. His plan was that we each could fly over each other's country. So they did the next best thing. They devised an airplane that they thought could fly over the country and not be shot down. And what the slide says is in 1954, the CIA, Central Intelligence, contracted Lockheed to produce the U-2. And the goal of the U-2 was to get to about 70,000, maybe a little higher. But it was basically a glider, so it flew very slowly. The first flight of the U-2 was less than 2 years after the contract was let out. Compare that to how long it takes to produce an airplane in today's world. In October of '57, Sputnik was launched. Some of you who are as old as me will remember that, because that was a bellwether day in the world, actually. Here in the United States thought we were ahead in everything, and the Russians put a satellite around the Earth. We increased our scientific training for individuals in engineering right after that to catch up to them. In '58, Lockheed started the Archangel program. And the goal of that was to not do 1 or 2 steps, but maybe develop an airplane that would be good for 10, 15, 20 years into the future and safely fly wherever it wanted to go. The goal was to go 90,000 feet and Mach 3, a lot faster and higher than the U-2. In August of '59, the CIA gave Lockheed the go-ahead for the B-12. The Archangel program went through the A2, 3, 4, all the way through. Most of the airplanes were not produced. They were designed with a slide rule, no computers, with a slide rule, and then from there, it ended up at the A-12, which was the airplane that they finally settled on. The A-12 being the first Blackbird. So when you think about the Blackbird program, it started with the A-12, and those airplanes were actually produced and flew. In 1960, the U-2 was shot down, and those of you who remember Francis Harry Powers, who was captured at the time and put on trial and ended up going to jail. He was eventually released. But that was a big shock to the country. It was a big shock to the president at the time, who was President Eisenhower. And it was a big shock to basically our entire military programs, because they didn't think that could happen. And what got them was an SA-2, the same kind of missiles that we had to escape and evade from in Vietnam. In April of '62, the initial 8-12 flight test, which was, as I mentioned, the first Blackbird. '63 of August, the YF-12, which was a variant of the A-12, but it was the interceptor version. They actually produced 3 of those. At the time, I was in Air Defense Command, and I wanted to fly the A-12, or the YF-12, and put in an application, but General Hagen, who was in charge of Air Defense Command, canceled the program. One of the problems was, in Air Defense Command, we had to sit 5 minutes alert. Well, you can't get the A-12, the YF-12, or the SR-71 off the ground in 5 minutes. It takes a lot longer than that. So the airplane, plus the cost and the time, they canceled the program. The next variant was the SR-71. Its first flight was in December of '64, and it was the reconnaissance version, and that's what we have one of here in the museum. The A-12 did deploy to Medina and flew operational missions over Vietnam. We have some of the pilots here who have done that. Tony Pavakwa flew those missions. The first SR-71 ops mission was in March of 1968. There was an overlap between the SR-71 and the A-12 at Okinawa. Eventually, the A-12s were removed, and the entire program was turned over to the SR-71, flying with Air Force pilots. The A-12 pilots were CIA pilots. Final SR-71 flight in October of '89, and then the final flight, we thought at the time, flown by Eddie Yildiz, who was standing in the back, was the flight to from LA to Washington, and that airplane is now sitting in the museum at Dulles Field. But in 1995, the SR-71 was reactivated, never flew any operational missions, and was deactivated 2 years later. And there's the man we can thank for all of these airplanes. Kelly Johnson designed was in charge of designing the U-2. He was in charge of the A-12, the YF-12, and then the SR-71. He basically ran what was known as the skunk works out of Lockheed. Okay, some facts. I know you can't read these. I'll read them to you. The all-volunteer program. All SR-71 crew members, front seat, back seat, are volunteers. We all took different routes to get to that program. We're all glad we did. We all loved the airplane. Most of the pilots came out of fighters. Some came out of bomber aircraft from strategic aircraft. All of them had to have about 2,000 hours of pilot time in other aircraft. And all of the crew members were experienced, highly experienced individuals, as you can tell from the people who you meet here. Stop one of us and ask us some questions while you're here. You might as well take advantage of the opportunity. Okay, the airplane itself flies at Mach 3.2 plus. That plus is about 1/10 of a Mach, which equals about 2,100 miles an hour, 2,200 miles per hour, or 36 miles per minute, which would mean you could get to LA from here in about 2 minutes. Provided you don't take the 91. The crew can see the curvature of the Earth, which is something that takes a while to get used to when you see it for the first time. You can see a little bit in the back of the picture. You may see, I've seen other pictures where the sky is black, and you can actually see the curvature of the Earth. The other thing you can see is what's known as the terminator, which is an actual line between day and night. And as you're flying from day into night, you actually see a line in the sky. And the airplane is actually flying faster than the Earth is rotating. When we get into individual experiences, I'll tell you an experience that I had as a result of that fact, that the airplane, particularly if it's flying toward the west and the sun has set and the airplane is going faster than the Earth is rotating, you can actually see the sun rise in the west, which normally it's in the east. Well, we're used to that too. Okay, what we can't fly the airplane without is the KC-135Q tankers. We would go about 2,000 miles or about 2 hours and have to land at the nearest air base if we didn't have tankers that we would meet en route to extend our range. Every mission, operational mission, more than 2,000 miles, and they all require that. We talked about heat. We talked about that this morning a little bit. We talked about it, Jerry talked about it when he was out there. The airplane heats up because of air friction going that fast. You can see the temperature range from 400 to 1200 degrees Fahrenheit. The pilot's window on the outside is 620 degrees. You can actually, through the pressure suit, when I put my hand up on the glass, and the glass, by the way, is about that thick, I could feel the heat from outside coming through the glass. It wasn't at 600 degrees by the time it came through the glass, it was much lower. The airplane grows about 3 to 4 inches in length and maybe 1 to 2 inches in width, and all the components inside have to compensate for that growth. Don can tell you more about how they do that. But heat is the major concern because of the speed, and heat has to be dissipated somehow and taken care of. Okay, operations. Let's see where we operate. You see Deal Air Force Base on the left. That's the main base, that's the training base. Over on the far right, Kadena Air Force Base in Okinawa, that's called Det 1. So if you hear somebody talk about Det 1, they're talking about Kadena. In the middle, you can see Mildenhall Air Base. That was Det 4. That came about later. When I first came in the program, we only operated out of Det 1, and then subsequently, while I was in the program, we went to expand it to Det 4. And you can see the area of operations. And we can get into more of that, specifically DC. And Stormy can tell you about their experience and some of the missions they flew. The little blue X on the chart is Diego Garcia. We actually did fly into Diego Garcia for supporting the military requirements in that part of the world. Okay, some people have seen what we call the Mach 3 patch. The Mach 3 patch is worn by anybody who has been in the program. And I'm talking about maintenance program, anything connected to the SR-71 Physiological Support Division. You can get the Mach 3 patch and wear it on your flight suit or your fatigues, whatever you put a picture of it on your car if you want. The next patch is called the Habu patch. The Habu patch is only worn by individuals who have flown operational missions in the airplane. So that would be pilots and RSOs who have actually flown operational missions. And I think somebody told a story this morning. If you, we used to give rides to political individuals or higher ups in the Air Force. They would also always want the Habu patch when they came down from their little training mission. And we would not give that to them, give them the Mach 3 patch, but the Habu patch was reserved for crew members. Okay, let's go back to the panel. And with the information I just gave you as background, we'll have each panel member give you a little bit of experiences they had, things that were unique to them, and maybe it'll spark some questions from you at the end of the program. We'll answer any of your questions about any aspect of the program.
No, I didn't know it was coming. The SR-71 was an enjoyable airplane to fly, particularly when you were trying to go in a straight line. Watching the miles count down while you're heading someplace, and so you end up going in 2 seconds. Did I get that right? 2 seconds a mile, right? A mile. So just think about you're on one of the freeways here, and you see a turnoff in front of you that says a mile in front of you, and you can, it's flat, so you can look out and you can see the bridge that goes over the top of the thing. And just imagine 1 potato, 2 potato, and you're going under that bridge. Now think about that. That's a long ways to go and pretty fast to do it. And when you're trying to go in a straight line, that's marvelous. I know I've flown a couple of U-2 stories that I sure wished I was back in the SR, because that thing was going at 1/4 of the speed. It takes forever to get wherever you're going. So, getting from here to England, Jack, what kind of time did it take you if you took off from Beale and you were going to go to England? Do you remember? about 3.5 hours. That's from California, across the United States, across the Atlantic, and oh, by the way, before he didn't go straight to England, he probably went up north of Russia and took a few pictures because he's already there, and then he came back a little bit to land short of the total distance that he flew in England. And so that's the kind of things I remember about the airplane, just how fast it went and how marvelous the thing flew.
Well, you gave a good comparison there in time and speed. You can compare it, if you're going 60 miles an hour in a car, then each mile is 1 minute. And you can compare that to 2 miles a second with the SO-71. Also, you mentioned about speed, and we used to fly what we called a kill. We would move the airplanes, replace airplanes, bring them back from overseas. I flew one to Okinawa from California with a mission en route along the periphery of the Soviet Union and Korea, and that mission was 6.5 hours. To this day, I'm still amazed, and I still remember that mission. To be here in California, and then 6.5 hours later, I'm in a van going to a base in Okinawa, Japan, on the other side of the world. I think I slept for 2 days after that visit. Don, what do you remember, experience-wise? Is it we have about 3 hours.
3 days. Wow. Yeah, I've been sitting here trying to think of which one of these 1,789 stories do I want to say. One of the, I'll just talk about something real quick. One of the things going along the thermal line that was quite interesting to me the first time I saw it is we had a term that we used on the aircraft where we'd take all the young troops and have them go cook screws. Okay. That sounds like a crazy thing, but there's a lot of folks in this room, some of the maintenance guys that know exactly what I'm talking about. But what would happen is due to the thermal expansion of the aircraft, there were blueprint call out for screw and nut plate usually started out with the same type of material, all titanium or stainless steel or nickel alloy or something like that. But we did have substitutes authorized depending on the heat of the area. So you could end up with a stainless steel nut plate, a titanium screw, or vice versa, as long as it met the heat requirements. But what would happen when you did that is that each one of those metals had a different thermal expansion and contraction rate. And so the aircraft would fly and would come back, and you'd go to take a speed handle and an apex bit and try and take the panel off, and you couldn't get the screws out. They froze together due to the heat expansion in flight. So you have to call a machinist out with carbide bits. And they first tried to do it with regular drill bits, and they'd go through 15 or 20 drill bits to try to get a screw out. So they finally went to carbide drill bits that would cut the titanium. But out of that experience, every time we pulled a panel off that had threaded screw fasteners on it, we'd have to take the screws or get some young troop to take the screws. And Scott, how many times have you done that?
Oh, too many to count.
And they would put them in a little bag and identify which panel it came off of, and take it over to one of our hangars, and we had an outfit set up. We had 2 ceramic ovens, kilns, so to speak, and you would dip the screws in methyl ketone to clean them, and then you would dip them in electrofilm 22T, which is a specialized graphite compound that Lockheed gave us, and you would bake them in the oven at 300 degrees for 15 minutes. Then you could put them back on the aircraft. So that's cooking screws.
I understand that thing leaked like a self in the seat. I understand the bird leaked very gently on the ground.
The fuel in the SO-71 used is unique among jet fuel. It's called JP7. It has a higher flash point, so if you looked at the airplane on the ground, it did leak. Tell us why.
Well, yeah, just a little history on that. The fuel on the aircraft wasn't even considered a combustible. National Fire Protection Association manuals define anything with a flash point below 140 degrees as a combustible. The flash point of this fuel when it was delivered. Some manuals, I've got one that says it is manufactured at 180 degrees flash point. Some say 165, and so the minimum we could fly with was 145 degrees. If the flash, because we had to do a flash check on the fuel prior to the flight. if it flashed less than 145, we couldn't fly, we'd have to take it off the aircraft. The aircraft leaked. I heard a lot of people ask me, I understand it leaks on the ground, but once it gets up in flight, it stretches and it seals the leaks. Yeah, true and false. The reason it leaks is due to heat. Somebody mentioned the aircraft experienced 2 to 5 inches in length and width. But the biggest problem is the aft wing tanks, or tank 6A and 6B, are the first tanks that go empty in flight when you take off. And all during your cruise leg, that tank is getting heat saturated up to 600 or 700 degrees and sometimes hotter. And it pretty much bakes the sealant that the tanks are sealed with. And I used to call it making it a crispy critter. And it would start leaking. The more you flew it at Mach 3, the more it would leak. We ended up taking the aircraft down every PDM and expending about 10,000 man-hours deep handling the wings, resealing the wing panels of the aircraft. Because it was a non-flammable, non-combustible, it wasn't a fire hazard, it wasn't a safety hazard. We actually surveyed our land at the Air Force Base and had an underground fuel oil water separator, 15,000 gallons of fuel. To catch the fuel, we emptied it once a week and resurfaced it.
Don, what's a PDM?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm trying not to use acronyms. PDM is Program Depot Maintenance. I believe every 600 hours on the SRC, and Program Depot Maintenance, Vermont update.
Thanks, Don. I'm sure I'm not unique in one aspect in that is that I still remember the first day that I got to walk under the wing of an SR-71. And the gentleman who gave me the tour eventually retired from the Air Force as a journalist. His name was John Story. And I'd ask you, when you go out and look at the airplane we have here in the museum, take a look at the surface of the aircraft. Because the thing that amazed me, I was used to seeing like an F-104 with a very sleek, smooth surface. I had flown the F-4 and F-101. They also had smooth surfaces. And the SR-71 has got screws and bumps and things sticking out all over it. And I remember saying to, I think he was a colonel at the time, I said, Colonel Story, this doesn't look like an airplane that's going to go as fast as it goes with all these protuberances, whatever they are, coming out. And he looked at me and kind of like, son, when you go Mach 3, you don't have to worry about going Mach 1. Good point.
One of the nice things about going from east to west is it was a great age-reducing program because you could land before you took off and start deducting those years from your age. You did it or not. But there's also exceptions to the rules of having a hot blue badge because when I was over there, they didn't have any hot blue badges. And so I ended up with an OL-8 badge with other people who I was with at the time. In fact, Dave Jensen was the one who designed the OL-8 badge. But I want to tell a story about the navigation because this is something I really truly believe I'm probably the only one that ever updated a navigation fix on a mission. This is over in Vietnam. We took off from Kadena, and about the time we hit 60,000 feet, we were above the clouds. I did not have a star illuminated light. There's a light on the navigation panel that illuminated when you struck stars. Now the airplane, when it was on automatic navigation mode, flew, and the system kept it within plus or minus 300 feet of the intended track, which is a pretty remarkable accomplishment. And so coasting down towards South Vietnam, where there was a fixed point and still had no starlight, and I put the cursor that we could see below us and in front of us with a view sight, and put the cursor so that it crossed this tip of land that had already been given a set of coordinates. And when it crossed the bottom of the airplane, you hit the button, and if there was any error in the system, it would come back and tell you how many miles. This thing said we were 3 miles off. Now the system, when it failed big time. It was not usable at all, or it never failed. So I said, I got about 5 seconds. I told the pilot, I said, I think I did this thing right, so I'm going to update the fix. We updated the fix, the airplane immediately made a turn, and as we crossed Hanoi, the starlight came on, showing we had corrected out the error, and now it was tracking stars as it was supposed to do. So that was, I don't think anybody else ever had the luxury of being able to do that. And of course, when we got back, obviously they kind of thought that I must have done something wrong, otherwise I wouldn't have had to do that. So Stanboard and Neutronics, who built the navigation system, had to come down to March Air Force Base and brief the general on what I had done wrong. Fortunately, I hadn't done anything wrong, and the Star Tracker, because when we started the engines and before we took off, we went to the navigate mode, an inertial navigation system, which automatically meant it was trying to look for the first star. Well, they found the first star before we got out of the hangar, a light bulb. And that light bulb was the exact color that the star should have been, right intensity, and close enough to the location that it said, I got star number 1, so let me correct the heading a little bit because it's off a bit. And away we went. So it was because we tracked the bad star in the hangar that we ended up having to update and fix. The mission was a success. I still kept my job, and things turned out very well. But we never again went to navigate inside the hangar, just for that reason. My contribution.
Phil, did you ever get the hobby patch, or do we still owe it to you?
No, actually, when I was down in Mesa, there was a guy that was a big fan of the SR-71, and I was telling him that story. He pulled out the hobby patch he had collected over the time and presented it to me right there on the spot. So I got my patch.
Let's extrapolate a little bit, because the system that Phil was talking about is called the astro-inertial nav system. And if you look at the airplane we have here in the museum, there's about an 8-inch square panel behind the RSO seat made out of glass. And under that panel is where the tracker that goes back and forth and picks out stars, and it triangulates between 3 known stars to find its exact location in Europe, on Europe, above Europe, when flying. Compare that to what they do today. Today, GPS requires satellites, not stars. Stars are not going to move around. They move in various locations, but you know where they're going to be. Satellites can be knocked out in time of war. I would actually feel safer if all of our military aircraft had star trackers as opposed to satellite trackers. Just something to think about. DC, tell us some of your stories.
Okay, I'll give you a few quick clips. Incidentally, that thing about the tracking stars inside the hangar, that was a big warning in our flight manual. I often wondered where that came from. Now I know. Funny things I have seen while flying the SR-71. One was doing an operational mission along the demilitarized zone between the North and South Korea, and was going from west to east at night, and everything was humming along, and suddenly this light appears from my left. I'm going about 2,000 miles an hour. This light's going faster than I am and goes in front of me, and then explodes. And I thought, well, at least it's not a SAM, because they would be going in the other direction. It was a meteor. It was fantastic. Of course, it only happened just for a few seconds. Next story that I saw that was kind of interesting was flying again at night from California to England, delivering an airplane. And around Greenland, I ran into the Northern Lights. Now, the Northern Lights, I looked it up, and they come down to about 150,000 feet or so, but they're not supposed to come down to where I was, around 80,000. But it certainly looked like they were. There were flashing lights that were green and blue and white and shimmering and taking on different directions as it was following the magnetic flux of the magnetic field of the Earth. And of course, we were going 2,000 miles an hour. I went through it in about 15 seconds or so, but that 15 seconds was really a very interesting light show. I certainly wish I had a camera for that. Another incident was when President Reagan was president. I'm sorry, let's back up. I came into the program when President Ford was in office. We were overflying Cuba. President Carter came in, and about a month after he assumed office, we stopped flying over Cuba, and we would fly around Cuba. And particularly what galled me at the time was that if we were south of Cuba and we lost an engine or had a degraded airplane, and we wanted to land as soon as possible, we could not make a left turn and fly over Cuba. We were forced to go around the island. But of course, that never happened, so I'm glad it didn't. But I was kind of a myth that even under those circumstances, the higher-ups, President Carter, would not let us overfly Cuba. President Reagan came into office, and about 2 or 3 weeks after that, we started overflying Cuba again. Now, overflying Cuba, to me, was important because during the missile crisis, Fidel Castro shot down the U-2 and killed the pilot, Major Rudolph. And so most of us didn't have a very good feeling about Castro. In fact, I hated the SOB. And yes, yeah. I didn't say what SOB stood for, but anyway, flying that particular mission was very rewarding to me because I knew that we would fly the whole length of the island, make a 180 and fly the whole length back. Now, the SR-71 has the advantage over the U-2 in that if they shot at us, we had a strategic air command tactical doctrine which told us what to do, which consisted mainly of jamming, turning, accelerating, and climbing all at the same time. Of course, we could maneuver a lot better than the missile could do. Anyway, knowing we flew over downtown Havana twice on that particular mission, and I knew that SOB Castro was not only hearing the sound of freedom, which is the double sonic boom of the SR-71, but he was hearing B.C. Thomas. And I took a great personal pride in that. Another one that where President Reagan fit into it was the last time that the SR-71 that we know that was fired on was in August of 1981. Mario Rosenberg and Edie McKim were the crew members, and this was over on the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. And the doggone North Korean shot a SA-2 at him, a missile. I think it was an SA-2. I think he shot 2 of them. Anyway, they saw the missile explode out to the right side. They took the evasive action, came back. And then for about 3 or 4 weeks, we purposely did not overfly that same area. We drew the reconnaissance legs about 30 miles south. And then Mr. Carlucci, who became the Secretary of Defense, came to Okinawa with the Deputy Air Force Chief of Staff and briefed us at Okinawa, the crew members, on what we were going to do about this. And what the plan was that they were going to have a couple of flights of air-to-ground F-15s flying in this area south of the DMZ, armed with air-to-surface missiles. And they wanted us to fly over this point where they fired a missile at Maury and Edie. They wanted us within a minute, so they wanted within plus or minus 30 seconds to the point. So we built in timing triangles in case we were off late. Took off, everything worked great. We used the timing triangles and we went over the spot right on time, within 10 seconds, I think. Feeling very, very proud of ourselves. Now, what I was thinking internally was, do I want them to shoot at us? Because I don't particularly care for the North Koreans either. And I thought that would be pretty neat, I would say that in a military sense, to just knock the hell out of them because they dared to fire at us. And I take it personally. So part of me said, I hope they fire at us. I wasn't a bit scared. I don't think my blood pressure or my pulse elevated at all because we have so much confidence in the maintenance and and the defensive systems. But the other side is you don't want to start a war, you know. So as it turned out, they didn't do anything. So, but that's one of those little stories that really isn't very well known, but it showed President Reagan's resolve that he was not going to put up with other countries more or less taking advantage of us.
Just a quick note on the astro-inertial navigation system, and I'd like to aim this at our technology at the time. That same system is currently flying in the B-2 bomber with the addition of GPS. That's how good the astro-inertial system was in SR-79. It's still in use and state-of-the-art.
That's good to know. Edward. I think one of the things that we talked to any of the crew members, we all have memories of things that we saw while we were flying in the airplane that most people never had the opportunity to see. We were blessed to be able to fly that beautiful airplane and take it to places around the world and see things that the average person doesn't see. And I'll share one story with you of what I saw. This was a flight out of Kadena in Okinawa. We were supposed to go through the Japanese straits into what some people call a Russian lake. It's the Sea of Odessa, it's how it's pronounced. It's pretty much surrounded by the Soviet Union. And we were supposed to fly into that over the water, make a circle, and come back out. Never flying over Soviet territory, but at least penetrating an area that they considered their terrain, if you will. This mission was so important that we had two airplanes. I was the primary, and another pilot named Bob Crowder. He was the backup in another aircraft. And we both went out, we both went through the briefing process. We had briefed what would happen if anything went wrong with my airplane, what I would have to do in order to get that information back to the ground so that they could send Bob off to actually fly the mission, because the mission was
I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I didn't touch
Everybody okay? Anyway, I took off. We accelerated to Mach 3. We headed up toward Japan, and the inlets started acting up. And trust me, we're all a little egotistical if you haven't figured that out yet. And our egos sometimes overplay our common sense. And I was going to make that mission and make that airplane go no matter what. My backseater, Bill Keller, said, "Are we still going? This airplane's flying like an old Ford." And I said, "Well, I think I can fix it." I couldn't fix it. I finally gave up. I sent the word back, had Crowder take off. Okay. So I make a U-turn. Crowder takes off. He's now coming north. I'm going south, back to Kadena. Very depressed. I'm still in therapy for that. As I'm coming south and he's going north, we're both above 80,000 feet. And we're both going Mach 3. And I can see him. I picked up his aircraft, a little black dot, probably about 25 miles away. He could see me. We had a signal devised. I hit the fuel dump switch so he knew I could see him. He hit his fuel dump switch, a little puff came out the back of the airplane. I knew he could see me. And I have to tell you, figure this, we're doing a Mach 3 closure, a Mach 6 closure, excuse me, Mach 6 closure. And it went like that. If I blinked, I would have missed it. It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And it's still in my memory, along with many other memories from flying that airplane. Any other memories people have? Easy? Stormy? What did you see that impressed you? Outside of the sun coming up in the west? Bill, you want to take off?
Yeah, well, definitely, but
Use the mic.
anyway, excuse me. The people in the maintenance business of this outfit, can't hear you. people in the maintenance business in this program. I'm slow. Anyways, usually phenomenal group of people. And part of my career of the program was as a maintenance controller and as the assistant DCM. And when they got to Okinawa, the CIA still controlled the T-hangar. So we had to put our airplanes somewhere else, and we chose the corrosion control sheds on the flight line. And the airplanes were nosed in, but you couldn't taxi to them, so you had to figure a way how you were going to get this airplane, engine started, navigation system set up, out, and on the way. So what they did, if you look the next time you go by the SR-71 out there, look at the tail, and picture yourself about 20 feet past the tail, maybe not that far, sitting on a tow tractor with a rod connected to the strut of the airplane, and the engines are running, and you're sitting there in a fireproof suit, and you're towing that airplane out backwards so that you can perform your mission. Now, I don't know what genius came up with that, but is really the remarkable of a genius that set that whole thing up. We never lost a takeoff on time, the navigation systems were set right, and we never damaged any airplane. So that was a remarkable memory I had.
Along that line, all those maintenance guys that were doing that would have a big fight the night before to see who got to do that.
Stormy, any stories? No? AC? Okay, I'll tell a story.
get to have told.
Each one of us has done something unique in the airplane. One of the things that I did was I flew the first night mission out of Kadena, post-Vietnam. And I'll give you a little background. Basically, the airplane flew during the day. It was basically a day aircraft. But one of the planners who would look into the future and see ways to keep this airplane viable thought we should start flying at night, and that would increase the longevity of the airplane so we could surprise people at night. That created problems later on, but I'll have to tell you how we got there. Fortunately, I had come from Air Defense Command, so I flew a lot of nights before I got into the SR-71 program. One thing we did, and probably the one mistake we made at the beginning, is the mission that we chose to fly the first night mission was the same mission we had flown during the daytime. And it was a two-looper. We took off from Kadena, flew east-west or west-east across the DMZ, did 360 and then turned around and came back. And then descended down into the tanker. But to get to the tanker, it involved a 90-degree right turn. So we're descending down from 85,000 feet at night, 30-degree bank, a slow turn. Anybody know physiological support? What happens to your ears when you're in a slow turn, one direction or another, and then 90-degree roll out to the tanker? Well, your balance is a result of little mechanisms in your ear. And if you make a slow turn, it's like putting your head down in a car and bringing it back up quickly, you get disoriented. And the same thing happened to me. And this is where crew coordination becomes critical. Because when I got behind the tanker, in my head, I was doing a loop. And that's what it felt like. And they always tell you when you're flying instruments or following something other than your intuitive sense, follow the instruments because you're probably wrong. And I remember talking to my backseater, Bill Keller, and I said, Bill, are we level? And he has an attitude indicator in the back, and he just kept telling me, you're level, and he was telling me how much fuel was going in, and all I'm doing is flying off the lights under the tanker in order to keep the airplane in the proper position to get the fuel that we had to have to do the second loop. Thanks to Bill, we probably saved that airplane that day because I would have gone all over the place. We subsequently, when I got down, we debriefed and I told him the problem. We subsequently changed some of the missions so that coming into the tanker was a straight descent instead of a curved descent. And it was a lot easier on the crew and on everybody else. Yes, sir, go ahead.
You brought up something that reminded something that happened to me. So I've taken off out of England fairly early in the morning, and our refueling was over the North Sea. and it was layers of clouds, popping through several layers of clouds, and finally I'm in between layers where the tanker's out in front of me, and the sun was relatively behind me, but it was shining through the clouds enough to where the clouds were bright on the bottom side of them, and I got the bright idea, but it was shadow enough in the cockpit that I said, I'm going to take the dark visor, like your sunglasses, but it's a big visor, and I'm going to put it halfway down. That way when I look up at the tanker, everything will be good so I can see the tanker, but if I wanted to glance down into the cockpit a little bit, I'd be able to see what the instruments are saying and stuff, because they were in a shadow and extra. It wasn't a great idea, because as I come up to the tanker, all of a sudden my head flipped and I'm inverted. My mind was telling me that this is dark, that's light, and the sky is light, and earth is dark, and my head had made me think that I'm totally inverted. I flew that entire 20-some odd minutes of refueling, talking to my backseater saying, talk to me, tell me what's level, tell me where we are. I think that I'm inverted. We still need to get this gas, but this is not fun. And I felt like, why am I not hanging from my straps? Because my head tells me I am totally hanging upside down like a trapeze.
So now when somebody asks him about refueling, he says, I do that standing on my head.
You emphasize the point of crew coordination, and I think what I'd like to mention now is the coordination between everybody in the program. This program, unique from any other program I was ever in, the professionalism of the maintenance personnel and the operations personnel, and the trust between the maintenance personnel and the operations personnel, and then within the operational personnel, the pilot and the RSO. As was mentioned earlier, I never pre-flighted the SR-71 before I took off. And I'm sure nobody else did. We would come out to the aircraft, we'd already seen the forms of each aircraft. The crew chief told us the airplane was ready to fly, and we got in and flew it. Never did that in any other airplane in my life. Always did a walk around, pilot walk around, check the airplane. But because of the trust between maintenance, operations, we were able to do that. And that says a lot for the program and the people in the program. And that's why we're still, 40 years later, we still get together, we still have a drink together, and we still enjoy our company. We have about 30 minutes for questions. I hope we give you enough background. If you have some questions in mind, expand on something we said, or question us on something you may have heard about the airplane, we have a microphone that will go. Yes, sir. I'll repeat the question if you don't have a microphone.
What's the ambient noise level like in the plane that the pilot experiences?
Okay, the question was, what is the ambient noise level, EC?
It was fine. All the noise was behind us, of course, and in the cockpit itself, you just had the air conditioner going, and then wearing the pressure suit helmet, every breath you take, you could hear, but it's, we kind of got used to it, so it was very pleasant.
And we had an option. We could be on what we call cold mic or hot mic. On hot mic, you could hear and just talk to the backseater. The backseater could just talk to you. On cold mic, you had to actually hit the switch to communicate with the other individual in the airplane with you. My backseater and I flew on cold mic, so we rarely even talked to each other, except for there was a checklist I had to go through or something else was going on. Question? Any other question?
Guy.
Yes, sir.
So guys, you should, first of all, thank you guys for being here. Having us here today, so this is so cool and it was so good. So thank you for your service. And you guys have a unique expression, something I'm really interested in. What are your thoughts regarding Francis Gary Collard's decision to not terminate English?
Do you mean to not kill himself?
Yeah, pretty much.
No, that's ridiculous. No. There was no reason to kill himself.
Okay, well,
It would have been wrong to do so.
Do you think it would have made any difference in how the thing would have played out?
It was just the thing that happened to him was the propaganda thing from the Russians, and who the hell believes them?
I was just reading a book on that recently, and if you go back and read Powers' book, which came out before the government and the CIA produced their history, they actually, in their subsequent history, supported everything he had to say in his book. So if you want to know his history, or what went under in that flight, or why he didn't do some things that people thought he should have done, he wasn't supposed to, and he handled everything very well according to subsequent CIA history. Any SR-71 questions?
Yes, sir.
Actually, did any of you ever experience a single engine failure or flame out in flight, and what were the ramifications?
I never did, but I'm sure DC.
In my 1,217.3 hours, I never had an engine ride up, much less losing one.
I had an incident that I ended up landing single engine but I didn't shut the engine off, I just put it to idle. And it's kind of a unique thing, I don't think anybody else has ever had this one. I was on a check ride, so I'm in the front seat, I have an evaluator pilot in the back seat, I'm hooked up to the tanker, refueling, and I get a blur of something go right by my right side. And the boomer says, disconnect. And okay, so we disconnected, dropped back a little bit, and he says, there's something wrong with your right spike. And we moved over a little bit so he could examine it a little bit more. And we decided that it was something well, later on we found out exactly what had happened. But we ended up taking that engine and putting it to idle and going land. What had happened was a light bulb had been replaced in the leading edge of the wing of the tanker and hadn't properly been attached to the tanker. So while we're in flight, that light bulb falls off, and consider the percentages of this. It falls off while I'm there, and it falls just in the right way to hit the spike and go through the engine. The results of it, Chief Campbell can probably refer to more because he probably saw that engine disassembled. But that's the only time I actually had to land with one engine back because we thought there was something wrong with it, but it didn't really give us any indications that there were anything wrong with it, but it shattered the outer section of the spike that I couldn't see. I'm glad this didn't happen at night because if we had accelerated and all these pieces would have started coming off while we're getting to speed and altitude, nastier things would have happened. Do you remember that?
I do. And it was, the glass lens cover, which was a pretty heavy piece of equipment that came through it, did a lot of damage to the airplane. Let me just say something really quick about the engine that we have. We talked a lot about the aircraft and its ability to withstand heat and all the thermal properties and everything, but I've got to give kudos to Pratt & Whitney. This engine that we've got in this aircraft is J58, Pratt & Whitney designation JT11D-20. It is the only turbojet engine in the history of aviation that you can light an afterburner on and never put it out. There is no time limit on the afterburner on this engine. You can't get it too hot. If you look at this thing sitting on a test stand at night, you can almost physically see through the engine because of the heat. And that's exactly what it looks like the entire flight on Cruise Lake. The engine is made out of special materials, mainly out of waspalite, which is designed specifically to put up with the heat. It's got ceramic liners in the afterburner. I can't say anymore. It's an outstanding motor, served us well. Yes, we had a couple failures. The last one we had, and in the last 26 years of flight, in 1989, we had an engine fail on an aircraft that caused the loss of an aircraft because of a turbine failure. But that's the only time in 26 years of flight. I don't know of any other program that can say that. We have a safety record above anything anybody else had in the military.
And I can add that from the pilot perspective, we had tremendous confidence in you. We practiced single engine landings going to be the program, and the airplane would respond well on single engine. Those who have landed with single engine did not have a major problem. The one accident toward the end was a serious and resulted in the loss of an airplane. But when you go out, when you leave here and you go out to look at the airplane, first you can see the engine. There's an engine on a static stand out there, and I suggest you all go out and take a look at it and look at the detail in that engine. But when you look at the airplane that we have here, you'll see, Stormy used the term spike, and that's that pointy thing that's sticking out of what looks like the engine. The first third of that entire piece is the inlet, and that spike moves in and out depending on the speed of the aircraft to maintain the shock wave in a certain point, because jet engines cannot take supersonic air. So if you're going supersonic air is coming into the intake, but at some point that supersonic air has to be slowed down so it can go into the compressor to the engine. And that's where the shock wave occurs, and that's what the spike's function is to maintain that shock wave at a certain point. The second third is the engine. The last third is the afterburner. So that whole thing that looks like an engine is really divided up into three specific parts. But we had tremendous confidence in not only the engine, but those who maintain the engine. Question? Yes, sir.
Were the ground crew, were they handpicked or volunteers? I mean, was that a general assignment for the enlisted man?
When we first started the program, everybody was handpicked. I was fortunate enough to be one of those individuals, and everybody was. As the years went on, we fell under the standard Air Force replacement criteria. Toward the end of the program, it was really pretty bad. We had a 33% turnover every year. Our training, I mentioned to somebody earlier, we spent a lot of time training our guys. It didn't make any difference to us what kind of airplane the people that came to us worked on. It made no difference because you couldn't apply the same factors to the SR-71. And so we had our own field training detachment where they had to go to school to learn this particular airplane. Then we created a training program called Critical Task Training, and I had 5 individuals that were severely trained and punished. They called it punishment. They were the only ones that could certify these guys that it's okay to go work on the airplane, and they did that by physically taking them out and making these guys prove that they could read the checklist, follow everything on the checklist, and do it right. It was a lot of work, paid off in spades. I can't say it enough. We have a tremendous safety record. Everybody in this program is proud of it.
And while you're here, talk to some of the maintenance people here, because some of the original maintenance people that worked on the airplane stayed with the program year after year after year, and that was a tremendous asset to the program. And it was in the latter years, as Don says, that the Air Force looked at the program slightly differently and started replacing people. But the professionalism in the maintenance corps is unsurpassed. There was a question, yes, sir?
I'm just curious, top speed on it, what was your limitation to it? Was it airframe drag, heat, engine thrust? What kept it at a Mach 3? You know, we always hear 3.1 and could have done more, but what was your limitation on keeping it from going faster?
The primary limitation was heat and the compressor inlet. 427 degrees you could not exceed. DC, why don't you tell us about some of the other limitations?
Yeah, the first limit was heat, and that's one that we generally hit. That occurred between Mach 3.2 and Mach 3.3, usually. It depends a lot on the outside air temperature. The compressor inlet temperature would change 3 degrees for every degree of change of the outside air temperature. The next is we didn't worry about the dynamic pressure limit. That was fairly high, and the reason we could go fast is that we could go high, and if you go high, you have to go fast to get enough air molecules into the compressor to burn the jet engine. There's also a stability limit that existed that we don't really have to know about, because as long as you obey the rules and didn't exceed Mach 3.3, then you didn't have to worry about that. But the faster you go, the more the center of pressure goes aft, which makes you more destabilized. Now, so that we would not have a large trim drag, we actually pumped fuel into the rear tanks so as to keep the center of gravity at the aft limit. We had one airplane that crashed during testing to find out what that aft limit was, and we found out in dramatic form. So we normally flew at the aft limit for the trim drag, and if you went any faster than that, if you just ignored the temperature limit and we went to Mach 3.5, for instance, your center of pressure would go back so far that you would approach being unstable dynamically. You've got static pressure, dynamic stability. Static stability is like a bowl. If you put a marble in it, it tends to go and stop. Dynamic stability means if you put a perturbation into the system, will you overshoot to the point? And if you lost your stability augmentation system at Mach 3, the airplane was still statically stable, but it would be dynamically unstable for any moderate perturbation. Because 1 degree of pitch will give you 3,000 foot per minute rate of descent or climb. So you have to be very, very careful. The stability augmentation system would keep the nose flying straight. But if you lost that, then you would approach. And then if you went faster, then you just put yourself more in trouble. I don't know anyone, but I do know one guy who deliberately broke the limits, and it was too bad, and he really got chastised for it. But other than that, I don't know anyone. I never broke the limits intentionally or unintentionally. And it was just important to stay within the limits, because if I broke the limits, the next guy breaks the limit, the next guy breaks the limit, the airplane's not as good as it should have been by the technical order. So I think we were all pretty well disciplined to stay within the stated envelope. I don't know anyone would be foolish to just, now we never were power limited, not at all. We always had power, you could always increase your power. But if you went straight and level and just put both engines into full afterburner and just see what it would do, that would be a very foolish thing to do. And no one ever did.
Remember what Don said. Don said that the engine is the only one that you can put it in afterburner and leave in afterburner. Well, the aircraft, as a result of that, is the only aircraft that can get continuous Mach 3 speed. If you look at other aircraft, if another aircraft, you can read something about an aircraft that hits a speed higher than what the SR-71 did, that's a dash. It's like hitting the gas, but then you got to pull it back because the engine will not be able to maintain the afterburner. You got to pull it out of afterburner, or you run out of fuel. Yes, sir.
You had mentioned what you referred to as an inlet problem. This is the one that caused you to be in therapy presently, I think. What exactly is that problem? What causes it? What is it?
Well, remember the inlets are run by computer, and Don can tell you the specifics, but sometimes the spike might not, it might move when it's not supposed to, or it might not follow the proper schedule, or the doors might not work properly. But we were having difficulty in that particular flight, maintaining street level flight because of the inlet problem. Can you expand on that?
To give you a full explanation of the function of the inlet system on SR-71 would be here another 2 hours. Basically, we maintain compression, we have a function of compression inlet pressure, compression inlet temperature, to maintain the shock wave in the intake, and it's all done computerized. Aircraft has 2 series of doors built around a circumference 360 degrees for color forward bypass doors, and there's 7.5 bypass doors on the face of the engine, and it maintains that pressure in between those. And so you can open them up depending on the readings you get in the cockpit and the house in. You can open and close the doors to maintain. You can do this manually. The computer does it all automatically. When that goes out of whack, you have a aerodynamic disturbance or unstart or pop the shock, whatever you want to call it, and it loses the shock wave. And I don't know, does that answer anything you got?
It does, but from your description, it almost sounds like it's like a computer problem, a software problem, something like this. Was it ever addressed and corrected for or fixed?
Yeah, well, they came out with a new system called Veth. These are automatic flight wing control systems. Took it away from the older system, solved an awful lot of problems. And I've heard some of the pilots say, gee, it was more exciting to fly the old system. We get unstarts, now we don't get them anymore, you know, so. But yeah, they came out with the DAFX. Mike, what year did they come out?
I got to Palmdale in '80, and we were still testing it. I would say '81, 79 was the first airplane that we delivered back to SAC with the system.
Anyway, it solved tons of problems with unstarts and made it a nice, stable platform.
For the most part, like the engines, the inlets were very stable. In fact, the mission I mentioned to you is the only one that I had to basically abort because of them from all the other flights I had. I got that kind of wind flow. I got about 15 more minutes, so that's that.
It's amazing how well this plane
That was 2 years ago.
compared, when you consider the realm in which it flew and all of the other statistics supported. From the time of the aircraft landed to when it was ready for another flight, how many man hours did it take by the end of this trip to prepare for that?
Excellent question.
Do you want me to tell a lie or tell the truth? Let me just say this way. It took 5 people about 8 hours to do a post-flight inspection. Okay? But yeah, then you had 5 guys another 6 hours to do a pre-flight. But the story isn't mainly that. Normally if you have an aircraft that's okay, that's really not a big deal. The guys go out and look at the airplane. That depends on what they find. If after flight they find a hole in the airplane, you got to fix it. That adds to it. But the other significant thing is the variety of sensors that we carried on the aircraft. All the flights were different. Very seldom ever flew 2 flights in a row with the same sensors. And so you had to download those sensors, take them in, bring other ones out. It was all time consuming. There were really crazy things in the wintertime. The engine oil on this aircraft, when it got to 0, turned to a solid. And so if it was below 70 degrees outside, you had to put heat on your engines at 350 degrees and heat the engines for an hour for every 10 degrees temperature rise that you needed. And so it was not a quick turn airplane. Now, if we were going to fly, if we had to deploy for some reason and just evacuate, say for a war or something like that, and go to another place, and we were going to fly out subsonic, shirt sleeve, we can forgive a lot of things and not look at a lot of things. And you can launch the airplane probably in a couple hours. We've actually experienced that. We actually developed a checklist to do that, to bypass inspecting many, many items on the aircraft that you didn't worry about at subsonic, that you didn't worry about at supersonic. But that's not it. One of the things that I compare this, and I've been on a lot of airplanes, B-58, you know, it was a Mach 2 airplane, okay, you know, as long as you didn't run out of gas, it sucked up gas pretty good. You couldn't stay there very long. F4 was a Mach 2 airplane. You know, Buzz, how many times did you go Mach 2 in F4?
Mostly just for the FCS, to test to make sure the engines work.
But during normal flights, you didn't go Mach 2.
And you didn't do it with tanks.
And you didn't know. And that's the significant thing about this aircraft. It's the only aircraft that its standard flight is at Mach 3 cruise. Every flight. That's what it was designed for. That's what it did. And it loved it. And the guys that flew it loved it also. I hope.
That particular point is the one that you have to emphasize when you're talking to current day aviators. Almost every current day aviator flying an F-18, F-15, F-22, they look at their max Mach as something that they can get to, and then they come back from that pretty damn quick because you just don't have the fuel to sustain yourself there for very long at all. Whereas this airplane cruised at Mach 3, and if you looked at your fuel curve and you saw that you were running out of fuel, you accelerated to reduce the fuel flow because it flew more efficiently the faster it went. So this is a total mindset paradigm shift compared to other aircraft, particularly what they're flying today.
One last thing from my viewpoint. 11,561 hours at Mach 3. SR-71. 11,561 hours.
Ask somebody how much Mach 3 time the B-70, which was another airplane that could go Mach 3. Jerry, did you have the time on that?
1 hour and 48 minutes total for the entire program.
Mach 3 airplane. Yeah, let's brag about that.
We can do that in one flight. Big deal, right?
Do that between one refueling and keep doing that for 6 more refuelings.
Yes, sir.
The photographs that you would take on your missions, were you privy to those, or were they automatically just handed over to, at the beginning of the program, you mentioned the CIA or whoever it was. Were you privy to those photographs?
I've seen a couple of them. I don't think, they were classified, obviously.
Right.
We had clearance to cover that classification, so if we wanted to see it. I don't know many people who would go up there and actually look at it, unless it was something unique at the mission. When I did my Cuba mission, I wanted to see a couple of the pictures that, because I flew right over San Martin Airport, and I wanted to see what it looked like and what we took. And I also received a picture of Bikini Island. The atoll where we blew up the A-bomb. I flew a mission over that island to take a picture of it. The mission, because the cloud cover was delayed, they finally did it, and I not only saw that picture, but I got a copy of it. We had the clearance to do that.
I might add that I have seen my pictures. I just wanted to see what they looked like and see if they were sharp and all that stuff. And I looked at radar as well as photos. I didn't know, it never occurred to me to ask if I was not able to see them. So, and no one said no, so I guess I was. The pictures themselves remind me of what you see at Google Earth, something like that. That's what it reminded me of. Now, I'm not a photo interpreter at all, so I could tell what was going on down there.
But BC, when I came in the program, I was a little ahead of you. You were not allowed to look at our pictures. Part of it was if we were shot down on an overflight, that we had less information to share. But since most of us had come out of the cockpit already, he said, if we'd see the pictures, maybe we'd fly the airplane better. We finally relinquished. But that wasn't, when I initially came in, you weren't allowed to.
Okay, well, I never asked the questions. So, the other thing is that they did tell me, that the best technique is to hand fly the autopilot, and I hadn't really thought about that because most of the time I just let the autopilot do its thing, but the autopilot would just tweak a little bit, and it's best to hold the stick steady while the autopilot flies. It's always easier to monitor than to control and monitor.
Well, Buzz raises a good point, because I remember along that line, the SR-71 had missions assigned to it if we were to go to war. If there was a war with Russia, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. B-52s had their plans, bombers had their plans, missiles had their plans and targets. Well, we had our plans as well, but we were not allowed to see them. The crews were not allowed to see them unless we went to war. So there was no way we could prepare to look at exactly where we were going to go unless it was war. We never did get to see them. Yes, sir.
With the addition of a data link capability and extended the career of the service life of Blackbird anyway alone.
It was installed, they still
When they resurrected the airplane, they added a data link to it. It did have to be within 300 miles of the ground station because it was a downlink data link rather than uplink to a satellite. But even that, getting the information directly off the airplane while it's still airborne, it didn't matter to the people who had probably decided to kill the airplane earlier.
The demise of the program was a result of a lot of factors. One being the family, two, the capabilities of it, others being cost. There were just a lot of reasons why the airplane was struggling. Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
Well, I had applied for.
What would be the question?
Okay,
question?
so why did I get rejected from the program on first application? Okay, it happened that I was short jet flying time by about 20, 50 hours, 100 miles, something like that. So I had applied for a waiver, asked to be waived. And later on, I had a conversation with General Nelson. He said, "Why didn't you call me?" Yeah, I'm gonna do that. Anyways, I went out as I was and I had the opportunity to do a lot of flying. I went out and flew my butt off until I got the minimums. Resubmitted and I was accepted. Good question though, because I knew I forgot to tell you why.
It was a big concern to you.
Any more questions?
You know, everything is done well in the program, but there are a few things that you might want to take away, knowing that we even have an IR sensor on the SR-71 so you can get infrared photographs. The only trouble is when you do Mach 3, the temperature line on the window is so hot that's all you see is a temperature line. So that was a thing they hadn't thought about doing. Although we did uncover some marijuana fields near Beale for a while. The other thing is they had communications intelligence gathering systems. But if you're traveling Mach 3, you only get about 15 seconds worth of conversation, so that's not necessarily going to do you any good. So we had a few things that we were going to do but didn't work out quite right. But overall, you couldn't find a better airplane.
Well, with talking about the communications, so one of the benefits of the SR-71, if somebody is transmitting in that location and you get a direct line of bearing to it, so you know it's somewhere along that line, in just a few seconds, you can get another angle on it. So now you can do an angle-angle determination of where it is, as opposed to the U2, who's just sitting here. He might be able to hear the whole conversation, but he can't tell you exactly where it came from because he's not moving as fast as the SR. So two different things are happening with the same kind of collection. Very important to be able to know where that was, not just what.
Yes, I'm going to tell you what it was like. Yes, sir?
No, the question.
Okay, the question was, the gentleman had heard something about night flying, and he heard about some kind of a level horizon, and he wanted to explain that. I'll have DC explain that because he worked on it. But I will tell you, flying at night, in your mind, picture flying 14 miles in the air in an inkwell. With no lights. Normally you fly, you've all flown at night, you look out the window of your 747 or whatever, and you see lights on the ground. If you're flying over an ocean, you might see a light here or there, but basically no lights. Particularly over in Asia, less lights. North Korea, no lights. So after we started flying at night and noticed that there was a problem with inner ear and maintaining stability, we did develop a program, and DC, if you could explain that to us.
Yeah, we developed it. Tom Tilden and myself actually were kind of the spearheading for that peripheral vision display, PVD. And the idea was we could put a laser projector on the right side of the cockpit. You turned it on, it would project a red laser light across the instrument panel. And you could dim the light, and you could move the neutral point. So the thing is, we found that the biggest problem was when the laser would move across the cockpit, if there was a shiny instrument, it would reflect back into the pilot's eyes. So we had to make sure that there were no shiny instruments. Anyway, the idea was to have this on so that it's barely perceptible, so that if you were looking at engine instruments or something and it moved, you would perceive the movement. And we had a main attitude indicator with two different sources of attitude information, plus a standby attitude indicator that was right on top, and it was a big 4-inch display. So you had three independent ways of telling what your attitude was, and in addition to that, the PVD would also give you another sense. So the idea was to pick up the first clue from the PVD, that you see this light move, and then you direct your attention to the main attitude indicators and fix it. So that it would make flying at night safer. There was one airplane that was lost because before all this happened, we had the main attitude indicator in front of the pilot. The standby was down here at the lower left corner, which is not a good place to put it. And they got into a turn at high Mach, and
it was a great addition to the cockpit, and it showed the flexibility and ingenuity that we could come up with to solve the problem. This brings us to the end of our program. We're going to end with a bang. But we do have